in Europe knew what it meant. The moment that seal appeared on the table, the Ottoman crescent pressed deep into red wax, the room went quiet. Because that letter wasn't a request, it wasn't a negotiation, it was a notification. The Holy Roman Emperor received one. The King of Hungary received one. The Pope received one. They all said the same thing in different words. I am coming, and you cannot stop me. For 46 years, one man sent those letters. For 46 years, he was right. He commanded the most powerful empire on earth. He personally led 13 military campaigns. He conquered Belgrade, Rhodes, Hungary, Iraq, and the shores of North Africa. He stood at the gates of Vienna, the last wall between his empire and the rest of Europe, and made the continent tremble. His own people called him Kanuni, the Lawgiver. The Europeans had another name for him, Suleiman the Magnificent. And here is what most people don't know. The West that feared him most is the same West that buried his name. Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. This is the story of the greatest ruler the West chose to forget. The year is 1520. The Ottoman Empire is not a rising power. It is not an upstart. It is a machine that has been running, conquering, and absorbing for 200 years. It has already swallowed Constantinople. It has already broken the Byzantine Empire into dust. It sits at the crossroads of 3 continents, controlling the trade routes between East and West, taxing the silk, the spice, the gold. And at the center of this machine, a throne. When Suleiman I ascended to that throne at the age of 26, he was already a different kind of ruler. His father, Selim I, had been a conqueror, brutal, brilliant, and absolutely terrifying. In 8 years, Selim had doubled the size of the empire. He had defeated the Safavids of Persia. He had crushed the Mamluk Sultanate and taken Egypt, Syria, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control. Selim had also executed 2 of his own brothers, 7 of his nephews, and several of his own sons. This was Ottoman succession. You survived it, or you didn't. Suleiman survived, and when his father died in 1520, leaving him the most powerful throne in the known world, the European ambassadors breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had watched Selim tear apart every enemy he faced. Now, here was his son, young, untested, reportedly a scholar and poet, a man who had spent his early years studying philosophy and theology rather than leading armies. The Venetian ambassador sent a report home. He described Suleiman as a man of learning, fond of study, well-disposed, and just. The implication was clear. This one we can manage. They were wrong. Suleiman was on campaign within 1 year of taking the throne. Not because he was reckless, because he had a plan. Belgrade, the White City, the fortress at the gateway to Central Europe. Every Ottoman sultan before him had tried to take it. His own great-grandfather, Mehmed II, the man who took Constantinople, had tried and failed. Suleiman took it in 3 weeks. Let that sink in for a moment. A fortress that had stopped the Ottoman Empire for 70 years. 3 weeks. The following year, he turned to Rhodes. The Knights of St. John had held that island for 200 years. They were the most militarily sophisticated order in Christendom, trained warriors, fortified behind walls designed specifically to resist Ottoman artillery. They had repelled Mehmed II himself. Suleiman landed 100,000 men on the shores of Rhodes. The knights surrendered after 5 months. Here is what most people don't know about that moment. When the Grand Master of the Knights surrendered, he prepared himself to be executed. The Crusader histories, the stories he had been raised on, they all said the same thing about what Ottoman sultans did to prisoners. Suleiman let them go. Every single night. With their weapons, with their banners, with their dignity intact. He told the Grand Master, "It is not without regret that I force this old man to leave his home." The Grand Master wept, and the story spread across Europe. Not just that Suleiman had won, but how he had won. Not with massacre, not with humiliation, with a strange, terrible kind of honor that no one in the West had expected. He was not what they had prepared for. The Battle of Mohacs. This is the battle that broke Central Europe. The young king of Hungary, Louis II, 20 years old, inexperienced, and badly advised, had been watching the Ottomans advance through his territories for years. He had called on the Pope for help. He had called on the Holy Roman Emperor. He had called on the Polish king. Nobody came, and you know very damn well what comes next. The Hungarian army numbered perhaps 25,000 men. The Ottoman force Suleiman brought to Mohacs numbered around 100,000. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. 20,000 Hungarian soldiers died in those 2 hours. The entire Hungarian nobility, the bishops, the lords, the generals, were killed or captured. King Louis II fled on horseback, crossed a flooded creek, and drowned under the weight of his own armor. The Kingdom of Hungary, one of the great Christian kingdoms of Central Europe, ceased to exist as an independent state. Suleiman entered Buda, the Hungarian capital, and did something that shocked every European observer. He ordered his soldiers not to loot. He paid for what his army consumed. He treated the Hungarian clergy with respect. He even attended a memorial service for the Hungarian dead. In his personal diary, yes, Suleiman kept a diary, he wrote about Mohacs. "The Janissaries killed so many poor people. May God be their judge." He was not a warlord who had lost control. He was a man in full control of an empire, troubled by the cost of what that empire demanded. That complexity is the thing his story deserves. And it is the thing Western history quietly left out. Before we go further, if you are finding this story as extraordinary as I do, you know what to do. Subscribe. Because the next chapters of this story are where Suleiman stops being a conqueror and becomes something far more dangerous. He becomes a man. And that is where empires are truly won and lost. This is when most histories of Suleiman slow down, because this is where the story gets genuinely human. Suleiman the Magnificent was, by every account, a deeply lonely man. He had been raised for a throne, isolated for a throne. Every relationship in his life had been shaped by what he was, not who he was. And then he met Hürrem. She was a slave, brought to the Ottoman court as a gift, as was the brutal custom of the age. Ukrainian by birth, renamed Hürrem, the joyful one, by the court. She was not the most beautiful woman in the harem, by the accounts of the ambassadors who wrote about her. She was something rarer. She was brilliant. She made Suleiman laugh. She wrote him poetry. He wrote poetry back. And in a world where sultans kept harems of hundreds and contracted political marriages but never loved, Suleiman did something that had never happened in Ottoman history. He freed her. He married her, not as a concubine, not as a secondary wife, as his legal, formal, official queen. The court was scandalized. The ambassadors sent alarmed dispatches home. The established order of Ottoman succession, which depended on keeping women powerless, had just been shattered by a man who loved his wife. Their correspondence survives. 600 years later, you can still read his letters to her. "My everything, my love, my moonlight, the one who rules my heart." Let that sink in for a moment. The most feared military ruler in the world, writing love letters to a woman he had freed, whom he had chosen. This is what most people don't know about Suleiman. He was not just a conqueror. He was a man capable of extraordinary tenderness, and that tenderness would eventually become his greatest vulnerability. Because alongside Hürrem, there was Ibrahim Pasha. Greek by birth, captured as a boy, raised in the Ottoman system, and Suleiman's closest friend since childhood. Not just a friend, something deeper. In the accounts of the age, ambassadors describe them as inseparable. Suleiman elevated Ibrahim to Grand Vizier, the second most powerful position in the empire, at the age of 29. He gave Ibrahim the power to sign documents in the Sultan's name. He gave Ibrahim a palace adjacent to the Topkapi, so they could walk between their homes. For 13 years, they ruled together. Ibrahim commanded armies. Ibrahim negotiated treaties. Ibrahim, by every account, was the engine of the empire's most brilliant years. And here is the brutal truth. Hürrem hated Ibrahim. Whether it was jealousy of his influence over her husband, whether it was political calculation, whether she genuinely believed he had become dangerous, we cannot know for certain. But the letters she sent Suleiman about Ibrahim survive, and they are not kind. Ibrahim Pasha had been Grand Vizier for 13 years. He had conquered Egypt for the empire. He had negotiated peace with the Habsburgs. He had built the Ottoman state's administrative machinery into one of the most sophisticated governments in the world. He had also, in a moment that historians still debate, referred to himself, in a treaty with a foreign power, as Sultan. Not Grand Vizier, not the representative of the Sultan. Sultan. Whether it was arrogance, whether it was a mistake in translation, whether it was the political trap Hürrem and her allies had been setting for years, we cannot know. What we know is this. Suleiman invited Ibrahim to a private dinner at the Topkapi Palace. They ate together, they talked. By every account, it was a warm evening between two old friends. Ibrahim left for his chambers. By morning, he was dead, strangled in the night by the palace executioners on Suleiman's direct order. There was no trial, no accusation read aloud, no public spectacle, just absence. Where a man had been, there was nothing. That resentment, that festering wound between a ruler and the closest thing he had to a brother, had been building for years. And when it broke absolutely. Suleiman never spoke of Ibrahim publicly again. He continued to rule for another 34 years, but the accounts of his later reign describe a different man, more isolated, more suspicious, more dependent on Hürrem, who, ironically, would die before him in 1558, leaving him alone in a way he had never been before. This is what power costs. Not the battles, not the campaigns, the quiet things. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what a conqueror looks like when the conquest is done, when the letters have been sent, when the kingdoms have fallen, when the man is alone with the decisions he made. When you live by the sword, you will most likely die by it. But it is the years before the dying that tell the real story. Let us talk about Vienna, because this is the moment that rewrote the history of Europe, and the moment Western historians use most selectively when they discuss Suleiman. 1. Suleiman marched on Vienna with an army that contemporaries estimated at between 120,000 and 300,000 men. No European force could meet him in open battle. The city was defended by a garrison of fewer than 20,000. The Holy Roman Emperor fled. Suleiman laid siege for 3 weeks, and then he retreated. Western history has told this story in a very specific way. It was a victory for the defenders, a miracle, the turning point, the moment the Ottoman tide was stopped. Here is what most people don't know. Suleiman's supply lines had been stretched to their breaking point. He had marched from Istanbul to Vienna, over 800 miles in one campaign season. His heavy artillery had been slowed by rain and mud, and much of it had been abandoned en route. He did not fail to take Vienna. He made a strategic decision to retreat before winter cut off his army. He came back in 1532 with an even larger force, an army so massive that Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, ruler of Spain and Germany and half the New World, refused to meet him. The two emperors maneuvered and circled, and neither one would commit to open battle. This is the detail that rewrites everything. The mightiest ruler the West had ever produced, commanding a continent backed by the gold of the Americas, looked at Suleiman across that valley and blinked. Suleiman's final campaign came in 1566. He was 71 years old, crippled by gout, so ill that he had to be carried in a litter for portions of the march. His doctors told him not to go. He went anyway. The target was a small Hungarian fortress called Szigetvár, held by a Croatian captain named Nikola Subic Zrinski, and approximately 2,300 defenders, against Suleiman's army of 100,000. Here is what Nikola Subic Zrinski understood. He could not win. He was going to die in this fortress. He chose to die in a way that mattered. For 33 days, his garrison held. Every assault was repelled. Every breach was repaired. Every Ottoman advance was answered with fire and blood. Suleiman never saw the end of it. He died in his tent on September 6, 1566, the night before the fortress fell. His death was hidden from the army to prevent collapse. His Grand Vizier dressed his body in robes and told the generals the Sultan was merely ill and receiving reports. The fortress fell the next morning. Nikola Subic Zrinski, knowing it was over, dressed himself in his finest armor, led his surviving men, barely 600, in a suicidal charge out of the gates. They were killed, but the delay they had caused, 33 days, meant the Ottoman army could not continue its campaign before winter set in. 2,300 men had stopped 100,000 for 33 days. The Ottomans never reached Vienna again. Suleiman the Magnificent died within sight of the fortress that broke his final campaign. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, here is the question this story has been building toward. Why? Why does a man who ruled for 46 years, who commanded the most powerful empire on earth, who built mosques and libraries and legal codes, who personally won more major engagements than any European ruler of his age, why does he live in the footnotes? Because this is what erasure looks like. The West that buried his name is the same West that wrote the history books for the next 400 years. And the story those books needed to tell, the story of Christian civilization triumphant, of European destiny, of the inevitable march of Western power, had no room for a Muslim ruler who had outgeneraled, outbuilt, and outlasted every European king of his era. Here is what Suleiman actually built. The Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, built between 1550 and 1557, is considered by architects and historians one of the greatest buildings ever constructed. Its dome engineering influenced European architecture for centuries. Its complex included a hospital, a school, a library, a bathhouse, and housing for the poor. He built 84 mosques, 57 colleges, 52 schools for children, 17 inns, 3 hospitals, and 7 bridges across an empire that stretched from Hungary to Iraq. He reformed Ottoman law so thoroughly that his people named him Kanuni, the Lawgiver, a title they considered more important than any military victory. He wrote poetry under the pen name Muhibi. More than 2,000 of his poems survive. He wrote about love, about loss, about mortality. My own heart is a city, and you are its walls. Without you, it is ruins. With you, it is home. He wrote that to Hürrem, the most feared man in the world, writing poems about the woman he loved. This is not the story we were told. This is not the story Western history chose to preserve, because his story asks uncomfortable questions. If Suleiman was magnificent, what does that make the kings who feared him? What does that make the civilization that buried his name? The Süleymaniye Mosque still stands. 460 years later, after fires, earthquakes, wars, and the fall of the empire that built it, it still stands. The Bosphorus still flows past the city he ruled. The bridges he ordered are gone, but the routes he established still carry traffic. The legal reforms he codified shaped the laws of nations that came after him. History tried to bury him in a footnote. But you cannot footnote a man whose empire lasted until 1922. You cannot footnote a man whose architecture still draws millions of visitors every year. You cannot footnote a man whose poems are still read, whose laws still echo, whose name, even 4 centuries after his death, sends people searching for the truth he deserves. Because his journey was written down, preserved, and told again and again through the centuries. A story that will never fade, no matter how many shelves they leave empty, no matter how many pages they quietly skip. The magnificent things, they have a way of surviving. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Suleiman the Magnificent, the man who stood at the center of the world for 46 years, the man history chose to erase, and the man you will never forget again. If this story deserved to be told, if Suleiman deserved better than a footnote, then do one thing: share this video. Because the only weapon against erasure is memory. Next episode on Historical Facts channel, he was the richest human being who ever lived. The West buried his name. Mansa Musa, the man who broke the global economy just by going on a pilgrimage. Subscribe, and we'll see you there.